Hello. Sorry I'm running a little bit late this morning. If somebody can let me know that I am live by posting in the comments section, I would appreciate that. Had a couple little IT issues here this morning, but we've got those straightened out. Perfect. Hi, Wendy. How are you? Jeff. All right. So, folks, this is our weekly marketing huddle here with Joe Lucey. And today, what I wanted to talk about was just the number one mistake that we are seeing with families and the retirement planning. Let's get this ideally up just a tad there. And, well, it still makes me, that's why I got a face for radio, right? Anyways, a lot of times when we are visiting with families for a complimentary review, I hear, we have this discussion. What do you think your largest expense is going to be? And oftentimes what I hear is it's going to be healthcare, or maybe it's going to be inflation. What are those things that it could be the price of groceries, what have you. And the reality is, what I find is that probably the largest expense that we are going to have in retirement is often overlooked in retirement planning. So today's market huddle, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what this biggest expense is. What do you need to be doing here today? I think we'll probably keep this a little bit closer to the 15-minute, 20-minute that we're trying to keep these to. So it should be a shorter webinar. And at the end here, if you are a current existing client of ours, I'd love to have an opportunity to discuss the content today. If you feel like we need to readdress that or come back to it in your planning, we are getting a ton of referrals right now. And I want to thank every one of our clients that are referring us to their friends and family. I think that with all the market volatility that we've seen since February, I think that maybe for the first time in a decade or so, we're starting to see families that have thought that retirement planning is just about the returns. It's just about the stocks and performance, ignoring risk, ignoring other things like income planning. How do I take my money back? How do I make it last a lifetime? Tax planning. How do I do that in a tax efficient way? So a lot of referrals lately. If you are referred by a current client of ours, or maybe you're receiving this email in the database because you visited with us somewhere along the way, but timing's better now, and you'd like to visit on today's topic or anything around retirement planning, everybody's going to have an opportunity to sign up for that here in just a few moments. So with that said, let's jump right in here. Here's that disclaimer. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some areas that many families may not think of as traditional retirement planning. I'm going to be specifically talking a little bit about taxes here today. Keep in mind, I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney. We don't do estate documents here and such. We do. I am a certified financial planner, so we've got some credentials around the comprehensive retirement planning process, which we think is so important here at Secure Retirement Financial. What is that number one mistake that families are making? It's quite simply, you're not using a look forward tax plan or tax strategies with your retirement planning. I think that for a long time, we've been thinking that retirement planning and asset management and financial strategies, that they're all the same. And if one thing that we should learn from the last 60 to 90 days, as we go back to February, boy, that's maybe almost 4 months now, is that wealth management investment strategies are different than a well thought through retirement plan, which has to include look forward tax analysis and income planning. How do I take my money back? How do I make it last a lifetime? And how do I do so in the most moral, ethical, legal ways so that I can reduce my tax burden? Let's think about this here. We got a perfect storm. Number one, markets are coming back to where we were a year ago, and even closer to the first of the year, down a little bit here today. But we have seen our account values come back. Now, on top of that, we're in the most generous tax environment that we have seen in going back to World War II. We have never been in a more tax favorable situation. The problem is this. We know the potential problem is this. We know that tax rates are going to expire. It's like that carton of milk you got in the fridge. There's a date on it. If you pull out that date right now about our current taxes, we know that that carton of milk, the current tax code is going to expire by January 1st, 2026. If you wait to do tax planning until after January 1st, 2026, it's like drinking that milk carton that's a week old. You kind of do so at your own risk. So we are encouraging families, regardless of whether you're within a couple years of retired or already retired, now is the time to start avoiding this number one risk, the number one mistake we see, and it's not bringing in tax planning into your overall retirement plan. An overall retirement plan has to include the investments, the investment management, of course, but it's how do I do reduce my taxes going forward. Look forward tax planning is not tax preparation where I'm just finding deductions, putting them on a 1040 and trying to do the best I can. And what's done is done. It's usually kind of driving with the, what's already occurred. I'm talking about looking at our returns and starting to look at other assets. How are my retirement accounts going to hit my returns? Not just in 2020 or 2021, but how about let's start looking out in 2025. Let's look out after the tax rates expire in 2026, 2030. What are my taxes going to be as my IRA assets start to come on? My Social Security comes in. Even things like capital gains and interest that you're receiving. If this money is just kind of rolling around in the accounts, maybe you want to start thinking about what are some ways I can reposition my money today so that I can put myself in the best tax situation here as we start looking forward. I visit with a lot of families. I have never met a family that has been in my office that when we ask them what they think is going to happen to tax rates over the next 10 to 20 years, I've never had a family tell me that they think the tax rates are going lower. Not once. We've asked that question many times. Nobody believes taxes are going lower. In fact, with over $3 trillion in stimulus and more coming, I think most of us recognize that taxes are very likely going to start going higher. And again, this 2026 date is a date you want to keep in mind. Making, repositioning things, being proactive today instead of reactive can put us in a better situation. So what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to talk about a case study that we ran across. Now, Don Johnson, and many of you remember him, he was the guy that was running around the Everglades in Florida. Boy, I had his name a second ago, and now I forgot to write it down. And of course, I Crockett. No. Anyways, I'll remember Don Johnson here back in the late 80s. Don Johnson came to us, not really, but you get where I'm going with this, with $1 million retirement account. Now, the real Don Johnson might be older than 60, but in this case, Don Johnson's married. He's 60 years old. He's got $1 million set aside in retirement accounts. The number one lie I think that us as boomers have been told, if you go back to when you started putting money in these accounts, was this. You're going to put this money in the account. It's going to grow tax deferred. And when you put the money in, you'll be at a higher rate than when you take it out. Well, when we started talking to Don about this, Miami Vice, thank you, Steve. As we started talking to Don about this, we started talking about Don about where tax rates are going to go. And what Don was surprised to find out is that when we start looking ahead, Don thought it was very unlikely that he was going to see tax rates lower than when he put that money in. In fact, he could see them higher. There's also hidden taxes, taxes on Social Security, maybe extra Medicare premiums, a lot of other taxes that come into play. The IRS doesn't care what your net worth is. All they care about is how that income hits your tax return in retirement. If you need an income of $100,000 a year and you're being taxed on $200 a year, that would be something that would be inefficient. Ideally, if you needed an income of $100 a year and you've got $60,000 of taxable income and maybe another $40,000 of tax-free income, and you can maintain your lifestyle with that, that would be a better situation than paying more than your fair share. The worst case, what I see is families that are retiring at a certain amount of income and being forced to be in a higher situation. We're going to talk about that because Don ran into that problem here. So Don, he's got $1 million retirement account balance. It's IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 60 years old. We're assuming his tax liability on this money, 30%. I pause because 30% is really probably unrealistic. You see, Don, in this case, is in a 22% tax bracket in the 2020 and 2019 tax rules. Taxable income puts him in a 22% bracket, and ignoring the fact that tax rates will probably be higher here after 2026. The other 8%, well, that goes to Tim Walz. That's our governor. He's going to tax us on this money too. If you're moving to Florida, we can rerun these numbers specifically for your situation in a lower tax state, Arizona, Texas, Nashville, even South Dakota, right? But in this case, Don comes to us. He's in a 22% bracket. 8% additional going to Minnesota. That puts him in a 30% bracket. 30% of everything he earns above a certain threshold is taxable. We're also going to assume that Don's going to get 5% return on his money. If you'd like us to use a slower number, like a 4% rate, we can do that. If you're a little bit more aggressive, you think taxes or returns are going to go back to 10%, we can show you that. But I'm trying to use a number that's not crazy here, and I'm going to throw another 1% fee on that for the expenses within those investment choices that you're making. That might be a little high as well. I'm trying to keep these numbers conservative. So quick review. Don's he's married. He's got $1 million set aside. He's 60 years old. We assume 30% tax bracket, which we know is probably conservative because it'll probably be higher. We're assuming 5% rate of return. We didn't try to set the bar too high there. And we're assuming 1% fees, which are probably a little bit higher than what most of you are paying with your clients of ours. And what do we see? Well, if I were to wave a wand and take that $1 million and I was able to take that money and roll it into something tax advantaged like a Roth IRA, and I paid, let me take it back. I'm ahead of myself. If we keep things the way they're at and we stick on the government program, we got $1 million. And on that $1 million, we are going to have required minimum distributions that will have to start coming out when Don turns 72. If he doesn't take this money and retires at 60, waits until 72 with that 5% rate of return, and then takes required distributions, Don is going to pay $480,521 in taxes off required minimum distributions. This is the money that's forced to come out of an account when I reach 72. Let me see if the slide got put in here. Here's a quick analysis of there. You see Don, remember he started with the million. Whoops, after the first year, it's worth $1,050,000. I hope everybody can read this. I'm just growing that money at 5%, 72. Don is forced to start taking required distributions. His account balance grew to $1.8 million. On that $1.8 million, we have to divide it by his life expectancy, 25.6. It's about 3.7%. That 1.8 times that 3.7, $70,000 is forced to come out of this account. Now, this $70,000, keep in mind, is already on top of Social Security. If you have a pension, it's going to be on top of everything else. And in Don's case, all of a sudden, he's going to find himself in a situation where he is has taxable income way up here, and his expenses at 72 are going to be here. Regardless of that, Don doesn't need the $70,000. He'd rather leave the money growing deferred. A lot of families that we visit with, a lot of families we've helped have been in the same situation. When required distributions start coming out, they get annoyed. They're like, Joe, I wish I could leave that money growing deferred, but we can't do that anymore. The IRS told us no. It used to be 70.5. Now it's 72. I got to take this money out. The 70,000 comes out. Don says, you know what, Joe, I'm going to put it into savings. He puts it into savings, but before he does, he has to pay tax on it, right? What's the tax rate we're using? 30%. Is it going to be 30% in 12 years? Who knows? I think it's going to be higher. But Don's case, he's going to pay 30% tax on 70. It leaves him $54,000. He's going to put that into an investment account. That investment account is growing 5% a year. Let's assume 30% tax on that because it'll be taxed every single year. That's where this number is, 195. Now, somebody says, well, Joe, I'm going to spend some of that. Take this money out. Take the 195 out because my illustration is still going to work, I believe, if you're following along here for many of you in this situation. Don waits until 72. He has to take $480,000 out of this account and tax on this money. That's this right. That's adding up the difference between these two. There's this 16,000 between 70 that has come out, and it's 54. I added that up. That came out to the $480,000 if Don lives to age 90. He puts the rest of that money into savings. He's paying tax on it. And then you know what happens at age 90? Martians come down and they take Don away. In fact, in this situation, let's just assume that Don, that those Martians come down, it takes him and his wife at the same time. You see, if his wife were to survive him, she doesn't get a step-up basis. There's no tax benefits. She inherits all his taxes. That's what we call the widow's penalty, because widows typically pay a higher tax when they inherit a retirement account than a married filing joint couple when it hits a return. In this situation, Don and his wife both go at the same time. It goes to the kids, and guess what? Now there's a kiddo's penalty because the kids are left with a certain amount of money. In this case, $2 million. No, remaining account value. 1.5 plus 2. We got $3.5 million in this account. The kids inherit this IRA balance of 1.5. We're going to assume that they just cash it out. They cash it out right away. They pay 30% tax on this money. Remember, that's the rate that we're assuming. That's the 2020 number, not the 2050 number, which is when Don turns 90 here. And the kids cash it out. Somehow, miraculously, they were able to keep all of that distribution, the 1.5 to just 30%. They're going to lose $334,000. I add the number up, and we're at $1 million. $1,011,159. Where did this account start? The account started at $1 million. A lot of families are surprised to find themselves in a situation. When I start running our analysis here, and again, these are conservative numbers. I'm using a 5% rate of return. I'm even throwing 1% in fees on there. We're assuming the tax rates don't go higher in 2026. $1 million on $1 million retirement account. It just seems ridiculous to me that that's what somebody would pay. Now, in the old days, we would stretch that money out when it goes to the kids. Since the Secure Act passed in December, has to be cashed out over 10 years. Best case scenario, we're assuming they take it out at once. $1,011,000. That's what Don's going to pay on his retirement accounts at plan. If he does what most people do, they just wait and wait and wait. They ignore that the number one expense in retirement is very likely going to be taxes. We've all heard for years, though, the solution to this, be proactive. Let's put it into a Roth. Now, I'm going to warn you, the number I'm about to show you is probably a little unrealistic as well. I'm assuming I could take $1 million and convert that over between now and 2026 and only pay 30% tax. Remember, that's 22% Fed, 8% to the state of Minnesota. And if I could get away with just 30% and convert it all to a Roth today, I would pay $300,000 in taxes, 30% of $1 million. That $300,000 to me, what that represents, that is a mandatory tax that Don will pay on his money. There's really no way around it. Like I said earlier, if Don passes away with it, his spouse will take it on to pay a widow's penalty. They have to be taxed on it, probably at a higher rate than 30%. Passes on to the kiddos. They pay their kiddos penalty. But $300,000, if I could just get it all into a Roth today, that's what we would pay. That's an obligation that's already been done because we already set the money aside. We can't go back in history and put it into, we took the deduction, so the IRS is going to make us pay for it. The 1.011, the $1,011,000, well, that's what we're going to play on plan. Here's the opportunity. I hope everybody can see this. It's not showing up very well. Hopefully you see my mouse. $711,159. What is that number? That's the difference between $1 million and $300,000. That's the optional tax. That's the opportunity by bringing in look forward tax planning. If you are not doing this in your retirement plan, you are making the number one mistake we see with families that come into our office. They think that retirement planning is all about which mutual fund to buy, or retirement planning is about buying an annuity that's going to pay you income. That's not retirement planning. Retirement planning is actually avoiding the number one mistake retirees make, not bringing in a look forward tax analysis. And in this case, we have an opportunity here where Don and his spouse can save maybe $700,000. Even if I bring that in half, $350,000, if I only saved half because we started doing look forward tax planning, would that be of value to you? $350,000 that doesn't have to come out of the IRA accounts that you can live on. Most families think that's a lot of money. I think it's a lot of money. A lot of families think that $1 million on $1 million balance is a tremendous amount of money. Here's the opportunity. If you're a client of ours and you have not gone through your look forward tax analysis for 2020, let's schedule 15 to 30 minutes at what I call a strategy session where we can review your situation. We can do it in person now, or we can do it virtually, or we like this, we can use Zoom meetings, things like that, or I can do it with just a phone call. But let's review where your situation is again for you here if you haven't done that with us. If you've been referred to the webinar here by a existing client of ours, schedule that same 15 to 30 minutes, except we call it a secured retirement IRA and required minimum distribution analysis. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Or maybe you are just joining us, or you've already been to a couple of these now. Timing hasn't been right. Let's take advantage. This is the number one mistake. We don't want to see families continue to make that. Let us show you how we can possibly save you $350,000 to $700,000. If your balance is smaller than $1 million today, that's okay. I'm just showing it for illustration. We have clients that range across the board from $200,000 retirement accounts to $1 million to far more than $3 or $4 or $5 million in retirement accounts. The planning I'm talking about here works for every one of you. Just the numbers change. So see what your number is. Set aside 15 to 30 minutes, because if we ignore it, here's what happens. Those excess RMDs can cause taxes around the RMDs themselves. That's number one. Number two, Social Security by itself is a tax-free income. There's not a person listening to our webinar today that would, if all they needed for retirement was Social Security income, that would ever pay another tax bill. Taxes on Social Security are tax-free. It's when other things hit the tax return, such as RMDs, dividends, pensions, rental income, these kind of things cause us to be taxed on Social Security. Unfortunately, what we see, a lot of families are going to be paying more tax on Social Security than they otherwise would have to, because they ignore these accounts. They let the accounts continue to grow tax deferred. Let's get proactive. Don't be reactive. Nobody wants to be sitting here in January 1st of 2026 going, gosh, I should have done something more around my taxes. I want to help you. My team wants to help you here. Also, Medicare premiums. Yes, it's an additional healthcare expense. Families say, Joe, that's not a tax. It is a tax. If I'm being taxed more for my premiums with Medicare because of my tax bill, my 1040, it's a tax. You got to avoid these Medicare premiums. When they started taxing Social Security back in 1983, only 4% of Americans paid tax. 4% on their Social Security income. Today, it's well over 50%. Right now, only about 4% of Americans are paying higher Medicare premiums. I start going out 10 years, 15 years, 20 years with all the different tax changes that have to occur. A lot more of us are going to be paying higher Medicare premiums because of the account balances that they have in their retirement accounts. I already talked about the other hidden taxes, widows penalties. Single filers pay more on the same income than a married filing joint. In many cases, we see that income jump 80%. I've seen it double. You want to make sure that you're looking at what those widows penalties are, and that could be male or female. We never know, but when you're a single filer, you pay higher tax rates than a married filing joint. And then the kiddos are going to inherit that. They're going to pay tax. I want to help you avoid that. Here's how we do it. Schedule right now, a 15-minute retirement, secured retirement, IRA and required minimum distribution analysis. You can do so by giving us a call right now at 952-460-3260. I put the cell phone on there. That's a cell phone that we have in the office because sometimes families have emergencies. If you're a client of ours, make sure you write that number down. Let's get that so you know how to get a hold of somebody on the weekends. But really, we're kind of getting back to where we're working out of the office. We're seeing families in the office. Again, we have some social distancing in place and such, but we can work with you individually there. Many families still prefer the Zoom meetings like we're doing now. We can do that, or we can just do it with a phone call. But schedule the 15 to 30 minutes. Let's put together one of these personalized analysis like I did for Don Johnson there. Let me show you how much your potential savings can be, and then let's just discuss what potential options would be on how to avoid that. I'm going to put that offer up right here. If you'd like to get on the calendar, just click the bottom there, and we can do that. You know what? I got a minute here or so. We're going to give this just another minute or so. Does anybody have any questions they want to post? Otherwise, we can wrap things up. And again, you should see that calendar invite in the bottom. If you're a client of ours, don't hesitate. We want to make sure that we can give you another, just kind of check in, do a look forward tax analysis. If you've been referred by somebody, click that. It's a good way for us to show you some value. If you've been listening to these for a time and you just, let us show you the value first, and then from that value and what we can help you save, then we can decide what some of those options are and whether or not, what the retirement planning future would look like if you were working with Secure Retirement Financial here. No questions. All right. Everybody sure? Going once. All right, no questions. You know what? Let's have a great week. It's going to be a steamer here in Minneapolis. We're talking about 80s today, 90s for much of the week. I think it's even through the weekend, so that's a good thing. I hope everybody else makes the week of June 15th the best they can, and we'll be back next Monday, 12 o'clock, hopefully right on the dot next week, and we'll come up with something else that we want to make sure that you're aware of with your retirement planning. Have a great rest of your week.